I remember the exact moment the universe broke for me. It wasn't in the roar of a shell or the scream of a dying friend. It was in the silence that followed, in a trench on a forgotten world, staring at the face of a dead man. His eyes were open, reflecting the bruised perpetual twilight of the sky, and in them I saw nothing. Not the Emperor's light, not the peace of a soul released from service, not even the terror of his final moments. Just a dull, milky emptiness, the vacant stare of spoiled meat. In that moment, the Imperial infantryman's uplifting primer, with its promises of glorious sacrifice and a place at the God Emperor's side, became what it had always been, a book of lies. A comforting fiction for boys sent to die in the mud. I know the truth now. The universe is not a silent, empty place. It is a screaming, chaotic ocean of life, of hunger, of feeling. It is a thing of terrible, exquisite beauty. And the Imperium, with its iron faith and its corpse god, is not a bastion against the dark. It is a cage, a tomb, a vast, intricate machine designed to stamp out the very spark that makes life worth living and replace it with the cold, dead mechanics of obedience. My body is no longer my own. It is a temple, a vessel for the glorious cacophony of the cosmos. Where my heart once beat with the simple, terrified rhythm of a mortal man, a star now burns. My eyes, which once saw only the gray mud and the gray sky, now see the vibrant, swirling colors of fate itself. My hands, which once trembled as they gripped a lasgun, now crackle with a power that can unmake reality. They call me a heretic, a traitor, a thing of the warp. I am all of those things, and I am so much more. I am free. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between the screams of my enemies and the ecstatic chorus in my soul, a ghost of the man I was returns. He is a simple creature, a boy from an agri world who smelled of soil and honest sweat. He remembers the taste of clean water. He remembers the warmth of his sister's hand. And he asks me, this glorious, terrible thing that I have become, a single, devastating question. Was it worth it? To gain the universe, but lose the memory of the rain? This is the story of how I learned to answer him. This is the story of how Private Merrick of the Vaxian 77th died in a ditch, and how I was born from his despair. My world, before it was consumed by the galaxy's greater truths, was a place of profound and beautiful monotony. I was born on Voxia Tertius, an agri world whose sole purpose was to grow the gray, nutrient-rich grok that fed the teeming hives of a neighboring system. Our lives were governed by two things, the slow, inexorable turning of the seasons and the equally inexorable demands of the imperial tithe. Our sky was a vast, open canvas of pale blue. Our horizons were broken only by the shimmering silver of the grain silos that stood like silent, steel cathedrals in the endless fields. My days were a rhythm of honest, back-breaking labor. The pre-dawn chill, the smell of damp earth, the rhythmic swing of a harvester's scythe, the warmth of the midday sun on my neck, the taste of sweat and dust. It was a hard life, a simple life, but it was ours. There was a truth to it, a solidity. You planted a seed, you tended it, and it grew. The universe, as I understood it, was a place of cause and effect, of effort and reward. My family had worked the same plot of land for 5 generations. We were not wealthy, nor were we important. We were a single, microscopic cell in the vast, sprawling body of the Imperium, and we did our small, essential part without question. We gave our grain to the tithe collectors, and we gave our prayers to the God Emperor, a distant, golden figure whose image looked down from the wall of our small, stone chapel. He was the great, cosmic farmer, and we were his humble crop. I had a younger sister, Alara. Her hair was the color of ripe wheat, her laughter a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. My fondest memories are of her, running through the fields, her small hand in mine. It was for her that I worked. It was the thought of her future, a future as simple and solid as our past, that gave my life its meaning. Then, the black ships came, not the terrifying vessels of the Inquisition, but the hulking, utilitarian transports of the Departamento Munitorum. The planetary tithe had been raised. Voxia was now required to provide not just grain, but men. An entire generation of us, The young, the strong, the healthy, were reaped from the fields as surely as the harvest. There was no choice. It was not a request. It was a demand, as impersonal and undeniable as the changing of the seasons. The day I left, I remember the smell of the rain on the dry soil, a clean, earthy scent that promised life. Alara pressed a small, smooth riverstone into my hand. "So you don't forget the feel of home," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. I made her a promise. A foolish, simple, and utterly human promise. "I'll be back," I told her, my voice thick with the certainty I did not feel. "I'll come back." I held that stone in my pocket as they shaved my head. I held it as they stripped me of my farm-worn clothes and gave me the stiff, unfamiliar uniform of the Astra Militarum. I held it as they herded us onto the transport. The great metal door sealing with a sound of utter finality, shutting out the blue sky and the smell of the rain. That stone was to be my anchor, my connection to the simple, solid world of cause and effect, of life and home. I did not know then that I was being sent to a place where such laws did not apply, a place where the only anchor was madness, and the only home was the grave. The journey through the void was my first lesson in the true scale of the Imperium's indifference. We were cargo, thousands of us, packed into the cavernous, dimly lit holds of the transport ship, the Emperor's benign conscription. The air was a recycled soup of sweat, fear, and ozone. The days and nights were marked only by the change in the lumen globe's intensity, a pale, sickly yellow light that did nothing to warm the constant, deep space chill that seeped through the hull. We were stripped of our names and given numbers. I was Private 867 to 5,309 divided by Merrick, a designation, a line of code in the vast bureaucratic engine of the Imperial Guard. Our education began. We were issued copies of the Imperial Infantryman's Uplifting Primer, a small, mass-produced book bound in cheap, synth leather. It was to be our Bible, our shield, our only friend. Its pages were filled with a simple, brutal catechism. The Emperor is our father and our guardian. The Xenos is a filth to be cleansed. The heretic is a poison to be burned. To die in service is the greatest glory a man can achieve. We read it aloud, our voices a droning, uncertain chorus in the belly of the steel beast. We chanted the litanies of hatred. We memorized the prayers of firing discipline. We were being systematically hollowed out, our simple, agrarian minds being scoured clean to make way for the new, harsh gospel of the Guard. Our instructors were hardened veterans, their faces scarred, their eyes empty of all but a weary, contemptuous duty. They taught us the basics of our new life, how to assemble and disassemble our lasguns until our fingers were raw and bleeding, how to dig a trench in regulation time, how to fix a bayonet with a prayer of hatred on our lips, how to die correctly, with the Emperor's name on our dying breath. They broke us down with methodical, passionless cruelty. They starved us. They beat us for minor infractions. They forced us to march in full gear for endless, punishing hours in the confines of the cargo bay. They were not trying to make us strong. They were trying to make us obedient. They were burning away our individuality, our pasts, our hopes, until all that remained was the uniform, the number, and the gun. I met the men who would become my new, temporary family. My squad. There was Sergeant Grigor, a man whose face seemed to be carved from granite, his voice a low gravel that commanded instant, terrified obedience. He was the rock, the unshakable pillar of faith and duty. There was Olan, a boy from a shrine world, his faith pure and absolute, his lips constantly moving in silent prayer. He clutched the Aquila pendant around his neck like a drowning man clutches a piece of driftwood. There was Kale, a cynical hive-worlder whose every other word was a curse, his eyes filled with a deep, nihilistic certainty that we were all already dead. And there was Reese, the youngest of us, barely a man, his face still holding the soft roundness of a boy, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a desperate, pathetic desire to prove himself. We were a microcosm of the Guard, the believer, the cynic, the child, and the veteran. And I was the promise keeper. The quiet one in the corner, my hand wrapped around a smooth, gray river stone in my pocket, my mind fixed on the impossible. distant dream of home. Our destination was a world designated Xylos. The briefing slates described it as a minor compliance action on a contested frontier world. The pict feeds showed a gray, rocky planet, its surface shrouded in a perpetual, swirling mist. The enemy was described as human secessionists, a standard, almost boringly familiar foe. The primer had an entire chapter on the secessionist, a deluded fool who has turned his back on the Emperor's light, a stray sheep to be brought back to the fold or put down. The reality of Xylos was, of course, far more terrible than the briefing slates could ever convey. Our lander descended through a sky the color of a fresh bruise, a churning vortex of gray and purple clouds that spat a constant, drizzling rain. The rain did not feel like the clean, life-giving rain of Voxia. It was greasy, leaving an oily, chemical sheen on our armor, and it smelled faintly of ozone and decay. We were deployed directly into a trench. Not a neat, regulation-dug trench from the training manuals, but a ragged, suppurating wound carved into the landscape. The walls were a slurry of gray mud, rock, and something that looked disturbingly like churned-up flesh. The floor was a river of filth, a mixture of rainwater, human waste, and blood. The air was a physical assault, a thick, gagging stench of mud, rot, cordite, and fear. This was to be our home. The war on Xylos was not a glorious crusade. It was a miserable, grinding siege. Our days were a monotonous cycle of misery. We stood watch on the fire step, peering into the thick, swirling mist from which the enemy could emerge at any moment. We went on patrol into no man's land, a landscape of craters, tangled razor wire, and the skeletal remains of shattered war machines. We huddled in damp, rat-infested dugouts, trying to force down the cold, tasteless nutrient paste that was our only food. The sound of distant, unseen artillery a constant, rumbling backdrop to our existence. And we fought. The enemy would come swarming out of the mist, their features obscured, their cries a strange, ululating chorus that sounded more animal than human. The fighting was a frantic, brutal affair. The high-pitched crack of lasguns, the roar of our heavy bolter, the wet, desperate screams of the wounded. It was not a battle of tactics or strategy. It was a meat grinder. We would push them back, and then they would come again. The line would move a few meters one day, and be pushed back a few meters the next. Men died for a few inches of worthless, corrupted mud. The promises of the primer, of glorious charges and heroic sacrifice, were a sick joke here. There was no glory. There was only the mud, the rain, and the slow, steady attrition of our souls. Reese, the boy, was terrified. He would weep silently in his sleep. Olen, the believer, prayed constantly, his faith a frantic, desperate shield against the encroaching horror. Kale, the cynic, seemed almost at home, his predictions of our doom proving more accurate than the commissar's speeches. And Sergeant Grigor held us together with the sheer, unbending force of his will, his belief in duty a rock in the sea of our despair. I simply endured. I did my duty, I cleaned my rifle, I stood my watch. And in the quiet, terrified moments, I would take the stone from my pocket. It was still smooth, still cool to the touch. It was a piece of another world, another reality. A world where things grew, where the rain was clean, where promises might still be kept. It was the only thing that kept me sane. The first crack in the official story, the first hint that our enemy was something more than mere secessionists, came with the prisoners. On the rare occasion we captured one alive, they were not the proud, defiant rebels the primer described. They were broken. Their eyes were wide with a terror that went beyond the fear of capture. They would whisper in a strange, clicking dialect, their words interspersed with phrases of perfect, archaic, high Gothic. They spoke of the great eye, of the Prince of Pleasure, of the joy of the change. Commissar Valerius, the political officer attached to our platoon, would take them to a special interrogation dugout. They would scream for a time, and then fall silent. The commissar would emerge, his face pale, and declare that the prisoners had expired from their wounds. He would order their bodies burned immediately. We all knew it was a lie. We knew there was something about these prisoners that terrified the command structure, something they did not want us to know. The bodies of the enemy dead were another source of disquiet. We were under strict orders not to touch them, to mark their positions for the cleansing teams from the Adeptus Ministorum, who would arrive in their heavy, sanctified environmental suits and incinerate the corpses with flamers. But we saw them. We saw the strange, geometric tattoos that covered their skin, symbols that seemed to shift and writhe at the edge of your vision. We saw the subtle, unnatural alterations to their flesh, the skin that was a little too pale, the joints that bent at a slightly wrong angle, the eyes that had an extra, shimmering layer, like an insect's. They were human, but they were also something else. They were people who were in the process of becoming a new and terrible thing. The whispers started then. Not just the rumors among the men, but actual whispers. On the wind, during the long, silent hours of watch duty, peering into the mist, you would hear them. Faint, sibilant voices, seeming to come from all directions at once. They would speak your name. They would speak of your fears. They would promise you things. An end to the fighting, a full belly, a warm, soft bed. At first, we dismissed it as shell shock, as the wind whistling through the razor wire. But the whispers were too clear, too personal. They knew Reese was afraid of the dark. They knew Olin feared his faith was not strong enough. They knew Kale believed his life was meaningless. And they knew that I, Marek, had made a promise I was desperate to keep. They whispered of home. They whispered Alara's name. It was a violation, a trespass into the last, private sanctuary of our own minds. Olin would begin to chant the litany of purity, his voice a frantic, trembling counterpoint to the insidious whispers. Kale would just curse, telling the voices to go to hell. I would clutch the stone in my pocket, its solid reality a frail shield against the encroaching madness. The war was not just for the mud of Xylos anymore. It was a war for the territory of our own souls. And the enemy was already inside the wire. The death of Reese was the moment the cracks in our sanity began to widen into chasms. It was a routine patrol, a simple reconnaissance of a collapsed enemy trench line a few hundred meters from our position. It should have been simple, in and out. But nothing on Xylos was simple. The mist was thicker than usual that day, a clinging, wet shroud that muffled sound and played tricks on the eye. We moved in silence, a line of gray ghosts in a gray world. Reese was on point. He was nervous, his movements jerky, his head constantly swiveling. He had not been sleeping. The whispers had been getting to him, telling him that the darkness under his bunk was filled with crawling things. We reached the trench. It was a ruin, blasted apart by artillery, and it was silent, too silent. The usual sounds of the battlefield, the distant guns, the groaning of the wounded earth were gone. There was only the sound of our own breathing and the soft, wet drip of the rain. "Something's wrong," Sergeant Grigor whispered over the platoon vox. "Stay sharp." Reese moved to the edge of the collapsed trench and peered down, and he screamed. It was not a scream of pain or fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated shock and a kind of horrifying wonder. "It's beautiful," he choked out, his voice filled with a terrible, ecstatic awe. He took a step forward, as if to climb down into the trench, his lasgun forgotten in his hands. Sergeant Grigor grabbed him, pulling him back. "Reese, what is it? What do you see?" But Reese was gone. His eyes were wide, unfocused, his pupils dilated to black pools. He was seeing something that we were not. "The colors," he whispered. "The music." And then he began to seize. His body convulsed violently, foam frothing at his lips. He clawed at his own eyes, his fingers digging into the sockets as if to pull out the terrible, beautiful thing he was seeing. We tried to restrain him, but he fought with a wiry, unnatural strength. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. He went limp in our arms. His eyes were open, but they were no longer the eyes of a terrified boy. They were milky white, completely blank. A thin trickle of blood, rainbow-hued and iridescent, leaked from the corners. He was dead. There was no wound, no cause. He had simply looked at something in that trench, something that had burned out his mind. We never found out what it was. We fell back, dragging Reese's body with us, a palpable sense of wrongness chasing us all the way back to our lines. The commissar declared his death a result of acute combat fatigue. His body was taken away and incinerated before a proper memorial service could be held. We were ordered not to speak of what had happened. It was a morale-sensitive incident. But we knew that Reese had not died from fatigue. He had been killed by a sight, by an idea, by a truth that the human mind was not meant to contain. The universe we were fighting was not just physically hostile. It was conceptually hostile. It could kill you with a color. It could kill you with a sound. The laws of reality, the simple, solid laws of cause and effect that I had grown up with, were a fiction. And we were standing on the very edge of the page, with the terrible, howling truth of the blank margin just a glance away. The loss of Reese, and the lie that covered it, broke something in our squad. The easy camaraderie, the gallows humor, the shared belief that we were all in this together, it evaporated, replaced by a quiet, gnawing suspicion. We looked at each other differently. We were no longer just brothers in arms. We were all potential ticking bombs, each of us carrying a private madness, each of us just one bad patrol away from looking into the wrong trench. Olin's faith became a frantic, brittle thing. He spent every spare moment cleaning his rifle, carving tiny aquilas into the stock, his whispers of prayer a constant, nervous hum. His belief was no longer a comfort. It was a desperate, panicked defense, a wall he was building against the whispers, and he feared, against the taint he saw in the rest of us. He started to avoid my gaze, and I would sometimes see him making the sign of the Aquila when he thought I wasn't looking. He was afraid of my quiet endurance, mistaking my stoicism for a lack of faith, a hollow space where the corruption could take root. Kale, on the other hand, retreated into a deeper, more profound cynicism. "See," he would say, his voice a low, bitter rasp as we huddled in the dugout. "The kid dies for nothing, and the brass feed us a line of crap. There's no emperor, there's no grand plan. There's just the meat grinder, and us. We're the meat." His words were poison, but they were also seductive. In a universe that had ceased to make sense, his nihilism was a kind of stable ground. If nothing mattered, then the fear, the horror, the whispers, they didn't matter either. It was a different kind of shield, but a shield nonetheless. Sergeant Grigor fought to hold us together, but the strain was showing. The lines on his face deepened. His voice, once a confident bark, was now strained, weary. He would drill us harder, enforce discipline with a new, harsh severity, as if by maintaining the outward forms of military order, he could hold the encroaching chaos at bay. He was a man trying to build a sandcastle against a tide of pure insanity. And then there was me. Reese's death had planted a cold, hard seed of doubt in my mind. Not doubt in the Emperor or the Imperium, but doubt in the very nature of the war we were fighting. The primer had taught us how to fight men. It had not taught us how to fight a concept. It had not taught us how to defend against a color, a sound, a whisper. The weapons we had been given, our lasguns, our bayonets, our faith felt like children's toys against an enemy that could kill you with a glance. My promise to Alara, my dream of returning home, began to feel not just distant, but fundamentally impossible. How could a man return to a world of clean rain and solid ground after he had seen the very fabric of reality begin to fray? How could you go back to tending a field after you had stood on the shores of madness? I began to feel a strange kinship with the enemy. Not sympathy, not yet, but a kind of understanding. They were not just men. They were men who had embraced the madness we were fighting. They had looked into the trench, and instead of dying, they had changed. They had accepted the beautiful, terrible truth that had killed Reese. What did that make them? Stronger? Freer? Or just more honestly damned than we were? The question was a heresy of the deepest kind, and it took root in the quiet, hollow space that Reese's death had left behind. The offensive, when it came, was not a battle. It was an apocalypse. It began with the sky. The bruised, gray clouds began to writhe and churn, swirling into impossible geometric patterns. The rain, once a greasy drizzle, now fell as a thick, viscous fluid the color of blood, steaming where it hit the ground. And the sound, the constant, Distant rumble of artillery was replaced by a symphony of screams, a chorus of a billion tortured souls that echoed from the heavens themselves. This was not warfare. This was the universe having a seizure, and we were trapped on the surface of its twitching skin. The enemy came out of the mist, but they were not the furtive, half-seen figures we were used to. They were transfigured. Their bodies were twisted into new and blasphemous shapes. Men with arms made of writhing tentacles, their flesh studded with screaming, infant faces. Women who glided across the mud, their lower bodies dissolving into a cloud of iridescent, carnivorous butterflies. And at their heads shambled the great beasts, the daemon engines, monstrous amalgams of brass, flesh, and shrieking, captured souls. The air grew thick with the smell of cinnamon and burned meat. The ground beneath our feet began to pulse, a soft, rhythmic beat, like a colossal heart. The laws of physics were not just fraying anymore. They were being torn apart and rewritten by a mad, ecstatic God. Our lasguns, our faith, our courage, they were all utterly, pathetically useless. A lost bolt would hit one of the twisted cultists, and instead of burning a hole, it would cause a shower of beautiful, giggling sparks. A heavy bolter round would strike a daemon engine and be absorbed, its kinetic energy feeding the creature's unholy life. Olin stood on the fire step, his eyes wide with terror, chanting the litany of purity over and over, his voice a thin, reedy thread against the tidal wave of insanity. A wave of the butterfly women washed over his position. For a moment, he was obscured by a cloud of beautiful, shimmering wings. When they passed, he was gone. There was no body, no blood, just his Aquila pendant, lying in the mud, its silver surface tarnished and corroded, as if by a powerful acid. Kale fought with a kind of gleeful despair. "I told you!" he screamed, his voice cracking with a hysterical laugh as he fired his lasgun into the oncoming horde. "I told you it was all a meaningless joke." A cultist with a face like a peeled-open flower spewed a jet of corrosive fluid at him. Kale's laughter turned into a wet, choking scream as his flesh dissolved from his bones. Sergeant Grigor died as he had lived. He stood his ground, his face a mask of grim, defiant duty, his bolt pistol barking. He was trying to rally us, to hold the line, to impose order on a universe that had descended into pure, screaming chaos. He was magnificent. He was a hero from the pages of the primer, and he was overwhelmed in seconds, torn apart by a mob of creatures whose very existence was an insult to the ideals he was dying for. I was alone. My squad, my temporary family, was gone, erased in minutes. I was surrounded by a nightmare made real. And in my heart, where there should have been terror, or grief, or righteous fury, there was only a profound, crystalline calm. The universe had finally broken, and in its breaking I saw a terrible, simple clarity. The choice was not between victory and defeat. The choice was between annihilation and change. I was backed into a corner of the trench, a dead end filled with the bodies of my comrades. The tide of horrors was closing in. I had 2 shots left in my lasgun. My bayonet was slick with ichor. My body was a trembling, exhausted wreck. This was the end, the glorious death in service that the primer had promised. But it did not feel glorious. It felt squalid, pointless. To die here, in the mud, for a silent God and a lie. The whispers, which had been a constant, insidious background noise, now coalesced into a single, clear, and seductive voice in my mind. It did not scream or threaten. It spoke with a calm, reasonable tone, a voice of profound and ancient wisdom. "Why do you resist?" it asked. "Why do you cling to this broken, painful reality? Your friends are gone. Your faith is a lie. Your body is failing. There is nothing left for you here." A tentacled beast, its skin shimmering with 1,000 colors, loomed over me, its multiple mouths gibbering. I raised my lasgun, my hand trembling. "Look at them," the voice continued, its tone almost gentle. "They are not your enemies. They are a promise of an end to pain, an end to fear, an end to the lie. They have embraced the truth of the universe, that there is no law but passion, no truth but sensation, no reality but the one you choose to create. I fired my last shot. It struck the beast in its central eye. The eye did not burst. It blinked, and then it turned my last bolt into a stream of molten, silver tears that dripped harmlessly to the ground. "Your weapons are toys," the voice said, with a hint of amusement. "Your courage is a delusion. Your Imperium is a cage made of bone and lies, and you are a rat, starving in the corner. But the door is open, little rat. All you have to do is choose to walk through it." The beast reached for me with a tentacle. I flinched, expecting a blow, but the touch was surprisingly gentle. It caressed my cheek, and in that touch, I felt everything. A jolt of pure, unadulterated sensation, the joy of 1,000 lifetimes, the sorrow of a dying star, the ecstasy of a god's birth. It was a universe of feeling in a single touch. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. And it was the most real thing I had ever experienced. The voice made its final offer. Survive, change, live. Cast off the gray shackles of your corpse god. Embrace the glorious, chaotic truth of what you are, a creature of passion, a being of sensation. Let go of the lie of yourself, and become a part of the great, beautiful, screaming whole. Choose life, Marek. Choose it now. My lasgun fell from my nerveless fingers. I looked at the face of the beast, and for the first time, I did not see a monster. I saw a possibility. A terrible, seductive, and infinitely liberating possibility. The memory of my promise to Alara, to survive, to come back, flashed in my mind. This was a way to keep the letter of the promise, if not the spirit. I would survive. I would not die in this ditch. The choice was simple: annihilation in the service of a lie, or life in the service of a terrible, beautiful truth. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my life, I did not pray to the Emperor. I prayed to the voice, and I said the one word that damned me forever: yes. The moment I said yes, the universe turned inside out. The change was not a slow, creeping corruption. It was an explosion, a dam of reality bursting, and the ocean of the warp pouring into the vessel that was me. The pain was ecstatic. Every nerve in my body was set on fire, not with agony, but with pure, overwhelming sensation. I felt the history of every atom that made up my flesh. I felt the pull of distant stars, the dance of gravity, the secret, screaming life that existed in the spaces between things. My body began to unravel. My skin shimmered, and the crude geometric tattoos of the cultists bloomed across it, not as ink, but as living, shifting patterns of light. My bones softened, their rigid, limiting structure dissolving, allowing my limbs to stretch and reshape themselves into new, more elegant forms. A third eye, milky white and all-seeing, opened in the center of my forehead, and through it, I saw the world as it truly was, a seething, glorious tapestry of souls, of emotions, of intertwined fates. The whispers in my head became a chorus, the voices of 1,000 daemons, 1,000,000 corrupted souls, all singing a single, harmonious song of praise to the Prince of Pleasure, the Lord of Excess, Slanesh. And my own voice joined them, a scream of agony and ecstasy that was both a death and a birth. The last, stubborn remnants of Private Marek, the boy from Voxia, fought a desperate, doomed rearguard action. The memory of the rain, the feel of the stone in my pocket, the face of my sister, Alara. They were like small, flickering candles in the heart of a supernova. For a moment, her face was clear in my mind's eye. Her innocent, trusting eyes, the promise I had made. And then the wave of sensation washed over it, and the memory was recontextualized. Her love was not a pure, simple thing to be protected. It was a sensation, a flavor, a beautiful, exquisite note in the grand symphony of feeling. The desire to protect her was replaced by a new, far more terrible desire, the desire to experience her, to consume her innocence, to taste her despair, to turn her love into a perfect, crystalline sculpture of beautiful suffering. The stone in my pocket, the anchor to my old reality, grew hot. It glowed with a sick, purple light, and then it dissolved, its solid, reliable matter, unable to exist in the face of my new, fluid reality. It became a part of me, its essence transformed into a single, perfect, gray tear that rolled down my new, flawless cheek. The last piece of my old home was gone, absorbed and transfigured. When the transformation was complete, I stood up. The battle was still raging around me, but it was no longer a thing of terror. It was a performance, a beautiful, chaotic ballet of violence and sensation. And I was its newest and most promising star. The tentacled beast that had offered me the choice bowed its head, a gesture of respect. The other cultists parted before me, their twisted faces filled with awe. They recognized me, not as the enemy, but as one of the chosen, a new champion, born in the crucible of despair. I looked down at my hands. They were long, elegant, and pale, my fingers ending in sharp, obsidian claws. They crackled with a faint, violet energy. These were not the clumsy, calloused hands of a farmer. They were not the trembling, terrified hands of a guardsman. They were the hands of an artist. And the galaxy was my canvas, a canvas that was crying out for a new and exquisitely terrible masterpiece. My new life began with a symphony of slaughter. I turned to face the trench line I had just been defending, the last bastion of the Vaxian 77th. My former comrades, the men who had been my brothers just minutes before, stared at me with expressions of horror and disbelief. They saw a monster, a traitor, a thing of the warp. I saw ingredients, a palette of raw, untapped sensation. Fear, despair, betrayal, courage, duty. All beautiful, vibrant colors, waiting to be used. I raised my hand, and a bolt of pure, violet energy, a distillation of my own ecstatic will, leaped from my fingertips. It struck the trench's main heavy bolter emplacement. The weapon did not explode. It transformed. The dull, gray metal turned to shimmering, crystalline pink. The gunner and the loader fused with their weapon, their bodies melting and reshaping into a screaming, beautiful sculpture of flesh and crystal, their agony a high, melodic note in the cacophony of the battlefield. The guardsmen broke. Their faith, their discipline, their courage, it was all meaningless in the face of such beautiful, casual horror. They fled, their retreat a chaotic, desperate scramble. And I, and my new brethren, pursued them. But we did not merely kill them. That would have been a waste, a crude and artless act. We perfected them. A man running in terror would suddenly find his legs elongating, twisting, becoming the graceful, multi-jointed legs of a gazelle, carrying him faster and faster into the heart of his own damnation. A squad, huddled together for safety, would merge into a single, writhing mass of flesh and limbs, their individual consciousnesses dissolving into a shared pool of exquisite suffering. I moved through the slaughter like a dream. Every act of creation, every transformation of mundane flesh into a work of agonizing art, sent a fresh wave of pleasure through me. This was power. This was freedom. This was the truth that the Imperium had tried so desperately to hide from me. The lie of the stable, ordered universe was a prison for the senses. I had been freed. Commissar Valerius, the man who had lied about the prisoners, who had executed men for the crime of despair, made his last stand. He stood alone amidst the wreckage of his command post, his bolt pistol in one hand, his chain sword in the other. His face was a mask of pure, righteous hatred. "Abomination," he screamed at me. "I will send your soul back to the hell that spawned you." I smiled, a slow, gentle, and infinitely cruel smile. "My dear Commissar," I said, and my voice was a chorus of a dozen different tones, a melody of seduction and menace. "You are still thinking in such limited terms. There is no hell. There is only this glorious, unending sensation." He charged me, his chainsword roaring. I did not move. I simply reached out and touched his forehead with a single, elegant fingertip. His charge stopped. The roaring of his sword died. A look of profound, horrified understanding dawned in his eyes. I had not attacked his body. I had touched his soul. I had opened the floodgates of his own repressed senses, his own buried desires, his own secret fears. I had shown him a glimpse of the universe that I now inhabited, He saw the beauty in the horror. He felt the pleasure in the pain. He understood the lie of his own lifelong, rigid self-control. He dropped his weapons. A single, perfect tear, the same color as my own, rolled down his cheek. "It's beautiful," he whispered. The same last words as the boy, Reese. And then he dissolved, his body turning into a shower of fragrant purple dust that was carried away on the screaming wind. He had not been destroyed. He had been understood, and the understanding had annihilated him. The battle for Xylos was over. We had not conquered it. We had retuned it. The world was no longer a gray, miserable rock. It was a canvas, painted with the vibrant, screaming colors of the warp. The sky was a perpetual, swirling vortex of violet and pink. The mud of the trenches had solidified into fields of glistening, obsidian crystal from which grew flowers with human eyes. The rain now fell as a warm, perfumed liquid that caused ecstatic visions in those it touched. It was a paradise of sensation, a monument to the glory of Slanesh, and I was one of its new masters. I was taken before the leader of the warband, a creature of breathtaking, androgynous beauty, who called itself the Liquescent Prince. It was a daemon, a being of pure, unadulterated sensation, and it had been the source of the voice that had guided me, that had offered me the choice. It looked at me with its 6 jewel-like eyes, and it saw not a broken guardsman, but a promising student, a worthy champion. It gave me a new name. It called me Marek the Maligned, the poet of the flesh. It gave me a new purpose. I was to be one of its emissaries, a missionary of its beautiful, terrible faith. I was to travel the stars, and I was to bring the gift of sensation to the gray, repressed, and starving worlds of the Imperium. I was to show them the lie of their corpse god and the glorious, liberating truth of the Prince of Pleasure. I was no longer a soldier in a war of mud and trenches. I was an artist, and my new medium was the soul of mankind. I was given command of a small warband of my own, the remnants of the cultists and the transfigured guardsmen I had helped to create. We were a traveling carnival of horrors, a troupe of performers in a grand, cosmic theater of cruelty. We moved from world to world, not as conquerors, but as seducers. We did not bring war. We brought art. We would infiltrate a society, find its pressure points, its repressed desires, its secret pains, and we would offer it a release. A symphony played on an instrument made of 1,000 screaming psychers that would drive a city mad with ecstasy. A drug, distilled from the tears of a captured saint, that would grant a lifetime of blissful visions in a single, soul-destroying dose. A sculpture, carved from the living, fused bodies of a world's ruling council, that would whisper the beautiful, liberating truths of anarchy. My work was subtle, and it was devastating. I was a virus, a contagion of feeling in the sterile, joyless body of the Imperium, and I was good at it. My past life, the quiet, observant boy from the agri-world, the man who understood the slow, patient process of growth, gave me an insight that the other, more brutish champions of chaos lacked. I knew how to plant a seed of doubt, a seed of desire, a seed of sensation, and I knew how to tend it, how to water it with whispers and promises, until it bloomed into a glorious, world-killing flower of heresy. And so the years, the centuries, bled into one another, a long, ecstatic dream of creation and destruction. Time has little meaning for a being such as I. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen stars born and die. I have danced on the ruins of worlds that were once mighty fortresses of the Imperium. I have feasted on the souls of heroes and saints, tasting the exquisite flavor of their despair as their faith crumbled to dust before me. I have become a creature of legend, a name whispered in fear and desire. Marek the Maligned, the Golden Tempter, the Lord of exquisite agonies. I have accumulated power, followers, and the favor of my thirsty god. My body has been reshaped 1,000 times, each form more perfect, more attuned to the symphony of sensation than the last. I am a being of terrible, transcendent beauty, and yet the ghost remains. The quiet, simple boy from Voxia Tertius. He is not a prisoner. He is not a voice of conscience. He is simply an echo, a single, persistent, and unchanging note in the chaotic symphony of my being. He is the part of me that remembers. He remembers the smell of clean rain on fertile soil, a smell I can no longer appreciate, for my senses are now attuned to the far more complex bouquets of terror and ecstasy. He remembers the simple, solid feel of a river stone in his hand, a feeling of grounding, of reality, that I have long since abandoned for the glorious, fluid uncertainty of the warp. He remembers the face of his sister, Alara, and the pure, uncomplicated love he felt for her. A love that I have repurposed. The desire is still there, the echo of the promise to return to her, but it is a dark, twisted thing now. A desire to share my enlightenment with her, a desire to break the cage of her simple, mortal existence and show her the universe of sensation that I now inhabit. I want to see the look in her eyes as her world breaks. I want to taste the exquisite flavor of her despair as she realizes the lie of her life. I want to save her, to free her, by making her a part of my terrible, beautiful art. It is the last vestige of my human love, perverted into the ultimate expression of my demonic cruelty. And so, my personal crusade continues. I move through the galaxy, a missionary of a new and terrible faith, but my path is not random. It is a slow, spiraling journey. A journey back towards the Segmentum Pacificus. A journey back towards a small, insignificant agri-world that the galaxy has long since forgotten. A journey home. I will keep my promise. I will return to Voxia Tertius. I will return to my sister, and I will bring the glorious, screaming truth of the universe with me. I will show her what I have become, and in her breaking, my own transformation will be complete. The last, faint, flickering candle of my humanity will be extinguished in the glorious, ecstatic bonfire of her soul. Was it worth it? The ghost of the boy asks me, as I stand on the bridge of my ship, looking at the star charts that guide me ever closer to my past. Was it worth it to gain all of this, at the price of that simple, clean world? I look at my beautiful, terrible hands. I feel the star of power burning in my chest. I hear the chorus of 1,000,000,000 souls singing my name. And I give the ghost the only answer I have. The only answer that matters. It was not a price. It was a liberation. And the final, most perfect sensation of all will be the moment I prove it to him by destroying the last thing he ever truly loved. The journey back has been a pilgrimage of desecration. With every system I passed through, I left a monument to my new faith, a breadcrumb trail of beautiful horrors leading back to my origins. I took a cardinal world, a bastion of imperial faith, and turned its cathedrals into palaces of flesh, its saints' bones into wind chimes that sang blasphemous lullabies. The cardinal himself, a man of iron piety, I did not kill. I blessed him. I opened his mind to the true, glorious diversity of sensation, and now he preaches my gospel, his sermons a thing of terrible, seductive beauty that has led his entire subsector into a blissful, screaming damnation. I found a forge world of the Adeptus Mechanicus, a place of cold logic and unfeeling machinery. I introduced them to the concept of aesthetics. I showed them that a machine could be more than functional. It could be beautiful. Now, their war engines are no longer crude instruments of destruction. They are walking sculptures of chrome and agony, their cannons firing not shells, but concentrated bursts of pure, weaponized emotion. Their tech priests have abandoned the hollow worship of their machine god for the much more satisfying pursuit of creating the perfect, most exquisitely painful piece of art. With every world I remade, I felt myself growing stronger, my connection to my patron god deepening. The liquescent prince was pleased. My offerings were creative. They showed an artist's touch. I was not a crude butcher like the champions of the blood god, nor a dusty sorcerer like the followers of the architect of fate. I was a connoisseur, and my palate was becoming ever more refined. But with every victory, the echo of the boy, Marek, grew a little louder, not in protest, but in anticipation. He was the part of me that remembered the path home. He was the compass, guiding me back to the source of my own humanity, the place where I would finally, completely, annihilate it. My warband has grown. Beings from a dozen worlds now follow me, drawn by the promise of freedom, of sensation, of an existence beyond the gray, grinding monotony of the Imperium. They are artists, poets, and murderers. They are lovers and killers. They are a reflection of my own fractured, beautiful soul. They adore me. They worship me. They see me as a prophet. They do not see the simple, terrified farm boy who is the cold, still center of the hurricane that I am. They do not understand that my entire glorious crusade is, at its heart, a deeply personal and pathetic act of cosmic vandalism. I am going home to burn down my own house, just to prove to myself that I no longer need its warmth. The hypocrisy is a flavor so exquisite, so complex, that only a true devotee of Slaanesh could appreciate it, and I savor it with every passing light year. We have arrived. Voxia Tertius. From the main view screen of my vessel, the agonized ecstasy, the world looks exactly as I remember it, a placid, blue-green jewel, swaddled in a gentle fleece of white clouds. It looks peaceful, innocent, unchanged. The sight of it stirs something deep within me, a phantom limb of an emotion I can no longer name. It is not nostalgia. It is not longing. It is the feeling an artist has when he looks upon a blank, untouched canvas, a feeling of immense, terrible potential. My champions gather behind me on the bridge. They see the primitive, undeveloped world, and they are confused. My lord, one of them, a creature of spun glass and captured screams, asks, "What prize could this mudball possibly hold for us?" I turn to them, and my smile is a thing of both beatific beauty and infinite menace. "The greatest prize of all," I say, my voice a melodic chorus. "The final ingredient, the one thing I have been missing to complete my masterpiece. Innocence. I do not plan a grand invasion. No orbital bombardment. No screaming hordes descending from the sky. That is not my way. It is too crude, too artless. My arrival on Voxia will be a whisper, not a roar. I will descend alone. I will walk the fields I once tilled. I will breathe the air I once breathed. I will walk into the small stone village of my birth, and I will find her. Ilara. Is she still alive? A flicker of cold, analytical curiosity passes through me. If she is old, her despair will be a delicate, fragile vintage, like an aged wine. If she is young, it will be a fiery, potent spirit. It does not matter. The instrument is irrelevant. It is the music I will make with it, that is the point. The boy, Merrick, the ghost in my soul, is silent now. He is afraid. He knows what is coming. He is the lamb, and I have led him back to the sacrificial altar of his own memory. My ship hangs in the void, cloaked by powers that this world's primitive augurs could never detect. My warband awaits my command. The stage is set. The artist has returned to his homeland, and the final act of my long and terrible story is about to begin. The masterpiece of my damnation will be the look in my sister's eyes as she sees what her brother has become. I walk through the fields of my youth, and the experience is a symphony of dissonance. The part of me that is Marek, the ghost, feels the familiar give of the soil under my boots, smells the rich, earthy scent of the groxwheat, and is overwhelmed by a wave of phantom grief. The part of me that is the champion of Slaanesh, the poet of the flesh, experiences these simple sensations as a new and fascinatingly bland flavor. It is like a master chef tasting unseasoned gruel. It is interesting only in its utter lack of complexity, its purity. My form is cloaked in a psychic veil, a glamour that makes me appear as I once did, a simple, strapping farm boy in the rough-spun clothes of a local. The illusion is perfect, but beneath it, my true form, my elegant, monstrous, and divine form, waits. The village is unchanged, the same low, stone houses, the same dirt track for a main street, the same small, humble chapel with the tarnished Aquila on its roof. The sight of that symbol of my old bondage sends a ripple of exquisite revulsion through me. The villagers I pass are simple. Their minds are a calm, placid pool of thoughts about the harvest, the weather, the health of their livestock. Their souls are a dull, steady, gray light. They are unplowed fields, waiting for a new and infinitely more interesting crop to be sown. I find my family's homestead. It is still there. The old stone wall, the heavy wooden door. It is smaller than I remember. More pathetic. A woman is in the yard, hanging laundry on a line. She is older. Her hair, once the color of wheat, now streaked with gray. Her face is lined with the worries of a hard life. But her eyes are the same. It is her, Ilara. The ghost of Marek inside me cries out, a silent scream of love and loss. The artist in me smiles. The canvas is perfect. She looks up, sees me, and her eyes widen. A flicker of confusion, then disbelief, then a dawning, impossible hope. Marek? She whispers, her voice trembling. The name sounds alien, a word from a dead language. I let the glamour flicker, just for a second, allowing her to see a glimpse of the glorious, terrible truth of me beneath the illusion. The swirling tattoos of light, the third eye, the pale, perfect skin. It is just for a heartbeat, a subliminal flash of horror. Her hope turns to terror. She takes a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. What? What are you? She stammers. I restore the illusion. I am just a farm boy again. I give her a sad, gentle smile. The smile of a prodigal son, a long-lost brother. I've come back, Ilara, I say, and my voice is the voice of the boy she knew, just like I promised. The lie is so perfect, so cruel, so exquisitely crafted, that it is the most beautiful thing I have ever created. It is a masterpiece of betrayal, painted on the canvas of a love I no longer feel, but remember with perfect, chilling clarity. The final act has begun. She does not run. She is frozen, caught between the hope that her brother has returned and the primal terror of the thing she just saw. It is a perfect, exquisite emotional state, and I savor it. You've been gone so long, she says, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. They said, the tithe. No one ever comes back. I was lucky, I say, the words flowing with an easy, practiced deception. The Emperor watched over me. I used the name of my old jailer as a key, a word to unlock her trust. It works. The fear in her eyes recedes, replaced by the conditioned response of faith. The Emperor, a name that makes everything simple again. She invites me inside. The house is the same rough-hewn table, the same hearth, the same faded tapestry of Saint Sabbath on the wall. The air smells of wood smoke and baked bread. It is a museum of a life I have moved beyond, a fossil of a person I have consumed. She tells me of her life. Our parents are gone, returned to the soil years ago. She is married now, to a good, simple man named Lauren. They have a child, a daughter, my niece. The information is, to the artist, a gift. More colors for the palette, more instruments for the symphony. She asks me of my life, of the wars. I tell her stories. Not the truth, of course. I tell her a curated version, a story from a cheap Imperial picked book. I speak of glorious charges, of loyal comrades, of the unwavering light of the Emperor. I tell her the lies that the boy Marek had once believed, and as I speak them, I can feel the ghost of the boy weeping inside me, horrified at this final, intimate desecration of his memory. I am using his life, his pain, his loss, as a tool of seduction. I am turning his tragedy into a cheap, sentimental fiction to lull his sister into a state of false security. She listens, her eyes wide. She is proud. Her brother, the hero, has returned. The simple farm boy went to war and came back a man, his faith intact. It is the story she wants to believe. It is the story her entire world is built upon. And I am going to burn it to the ground. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the floor, her husband and daughter return from the fields. Lauren is a big, simple man, his hands calloused, his face open and honest. He is wary of me, this stranger who claims to be his wife's long-lost brother. But Ilara's joy is infectious, and he accepts me. And the child. Her name is Vanya. She is small, with her mother's wheat-colored hair and a child's pure, uncomplicated soul. She looks at me with wide, curious eyes. I smile at her. A perfect, gentle, uncle's smile. And in my mind, the artist begins to sketch. The composition is becoming clear. The mother, the father, the child. A perfect, holy trinity of innocence and simple love. A perfect sculpture, waiting to be carved. The stage is set, the actors are in place. And tonight, when the moon is high, the performance will begin. I will show them the gift. I will show them the glorious, screaming truth that I have brought home with me from the stars. I will keep my promise. I will make sure that none of them ever forget me. The night is deep and quiet. The only sound, the gentle chirping of unseen insects. The small family sleeps, their minds filled with simple, untroubled dreams. It is time. I do not need to force a lock. The door opens to my silent psychic command. I move through the small house like a ghost, a phantom of their own repressed desires. I stand over the bed where Loran and Alara sleep. They are so fragile, so beautifully, exquisitely breakable. The artist in me admires the raw material. The love between them is a tangible thing, a warm, golden light that I can see with my third eye. It is a pure, unrefined power. I will give it form. I begin my work not with a scream, but with a whisper. I enter their dreams. To Loran, the simple farmer, I show a vision of a harvest unlike any he has ever known. Fields of living, writhing crops that sing in ecstatic chorus as they are reaped. A harvest of pure sensation. I offer him an escape from the endless, back-breaking toil. A world where the reward is not sustenance, but bliss. To Alara, I show a different vision. I show her me, not the farm boy, but the glorious, terrible being I have become. I show her the galaxy of wonders I have seen, the palaces of pleasure, the symphonies of feeling. I show her a life beyond this small, gray world. A life of passion, of art, of freedom. I am not a monster in her dream. I am a savior, an angel of liberation, offering her the key to her cage. And to the child, Vanya, I give the simplest and most potent gift of all. I sing her a lullaby, a song I learned from a daemonette in a palace of mirrors. A song whose melody is mathematically perfect, whose notes are designed to unlock the parts of the mind that a mortal is not meant to use. A song of pure, beautiful, and devastating potential. They wake up, not slowly, but all at once, with a single, synchronized gasp. Their eyes are wide, not with terror, but with a profound, earth-shattering wonder. They have seen the truth. They have been given a glimpse of the glorious what-if that their gray, repressed lives have denied them. They look at me, standing at the foot of their bed. The glamour is gone. I am revealed in my true form, my pale skin glowing faintly in the moonlight, my third eye a luminous, knowing pearl. "Brother?" Alara whispers, but the word is not a question. It is a prayer. Loran does not reach for the wood axe by the hearth. He reaches for his wife's hand, his eyes filled with a dawning, terrible hunger for the harvest of bliss I have shown him. And from the other room, I can hear the child, Vanya, begin to hum. The melody of the lullaby, the song of unlocking. The seed has been planted, the soil has been prepared, and the beautiful, terrible flower of heresy is about to bloom in the heart of this quiet, simple family. The true art is about to begin. The transformation of the homestead was a delicate, intimate process. It was my finest work, a chamber piece compared to the grand, operatic destructions of my past. I did not use force. I did not use overt displays of power. I used temptation. I became their teacher, their guru, their prophet of a new and beautiful faith. I taught Loran that the purpose of the soil was not to grow Grok's wheat, but to feel. He began to till the fields not with a plow, but with his bare hands. His consciousness merged with the earth, feeling the slow, secret life of the worms, the deep, patient thirst of the roots. The fields began to change. The wheat withered, and in its place grew strange, beautiful, and semi-sentient flora. Flowers with petals like velvet skin that would sigh when caressed. Fruits that, when eaten, would fill the mind with memories that were not one's own. The farm was no longer a place of production. It was a garden of earthly and unearthly delights. I taught Alara that the purpose of a home was not shelter, but expression. The stone walls of the house softened, became pliable, like living flesh. She learned to shape them with her thoughts, her emotions painting the walls in swirling, shifting colors. Her joy made the ceilings rise into soaring, vaulted arches. Her secret sorrows caused small, beautiful, crystal tears to form on the window panes. The house became a living extension of her soul, a breathing work of architectural art. And Vanya, the child. Vanya was my prodigy. The lullaby had unlocked her latent psychic potential, a gift that, in the gray Imperium, would have seen her taken by the black ships. I nurtured it. I taught her that her mind was not a prison for a single, lonely consciousness, but a gateway. She learned to listen to the whispers on the wind, the secret songs of the void, the thoughts of the strange new creatures that began to emerge from her father's garden. She was becoming a true child of the warp, her innocence a perfect lens through which to perceive its terrible, beautiful truths. The family was happy. They were living in a paradise of their own making, a small, perfect bubble of sensation and freedom. They had cast off the gray shackles of their old lives. They worshipped me. I was their beloved brother, their wise teacher, their gentle savior. They did not see the terrible price of their liberation. They did not see that the beautiful flowers in the garden fed on their memories, that the living house fed on their emotions, that the whispers the child heard were slowly, patiently, devouring her soul. They were living in a beautiful, bespoke cage, and they did not even know it. The ghost of Merrick inside me was silent during this. He could not argue with their happiness. He could not deny the beauty of what I had created. He saw his sister, smiling, her face free from the lines of worry and toil. He saw her family, living in a world of wonder, and the part of him that loved her was confused. Was this not a better life than the one of toil and tithes he had left behind? Was this liberation not a form of love? The question was the most insidious heresy of all, and it began to erode the last, stubborn foundations of his own grief. The final element of the masterpiece was the village. The perfect, happy family living in their garden of paradise was a beautiful composition, but it lacked an audience. Art requires a witness. I began to expand my influence. The seeds of my gospel were carried on the wind from Laurent's singing fields. The melody of Vanya's humming was heard by the other children in the village. The sight of Alara's beautiful, living house, shimmering on the horizon, became a source of wonder and envy. The villagers, with their dull, gray souls and their lives of quiet desperation, were fertile ground. They saw the joy of my new converts, and they wanted it. They came to me, first in secret, then in droves. They came to the farm, which they now called the Garden of Earthly Whispers. They came to me, their faces filled with a desperate, hungry hope. They asked me for my secret, and I gave it to them, freely. I taught them the catechism of sensation. I taught them that the emperor was a distant, silent landlord, demanding rent for a house he had long since abandoned. I taught them that the true gods, the gods of the soul, were right here, in the beat of their own hearts, in the desires of their own flesh, in the secret, wonderful thoughts they had been taught to be ashamed of. I did not need to conquer their minds. I simply gave them permission to be themselves. The village of Voxia Primus became my parish. The old, stone chapel was redecorated. The grim, golden icon of the emperor was replaced with a shimmering, ever-changing sculpture of light and sound that was a direct reflection of the congregation's collective emotional state. The pews were replaced with soft, living cushions that would gently caress the worshippers. The sermons were not lectures on duty and sacrifice, but shared experiences, guided meditations into the beautiful, terrifying landscapes of their own souls. It was a quiet, peaceful, and utterly devastating revolution. There was no bloodshed, no violence, only a slow, gentle and joyous slide into damnation. The imperial tithe was forgotten. The rigid schedules of the farm were abandoned. The people of Voxia Primus gave themselves over to the pursuit of feeling, of art, of self-expression. They were happy, they were free, and they were utterly, irrevocably lost. My work was almost complete. The canvas was painted. The symphony was composed. I had taken a piece of the gray, monotonous Imperium and turned it into a jewel of my new faith, a perfect, self-contained paradise of Slaaneshi devotion. The ghost of Marek no longer wept. He was silent. He had watched me give his people, his sister, a life of joy and wonder that he could never have provided. His simple binary morality, of good and evil, of home and war, had been dissolved in the beautiful, complex ambiguity of what I had created. He had been a man who wanted to protect his home. I had perfected it. In his silence, I knew I had finally, truly defeated him. The Imperium, of course, could not let such a beautiful thing exist. The machine does not tolerate anomalies. The tithe collectors came and found a world that had forgotten them. The priests came and found a chapel that sang a different, more beautiful song. The enforcers came and found a populace that would not be cowed by threats. For what threat can you make to a people who have learned to find the pleasure in pain? The reports went up the chain of command. The slow, grinding gears of the imperial war machine began to turn. A fleet was dispatched. The Vaxian 77th, or what was left of it, was being sent to a new war zone, a minor compliance action on a heretical agri-world, a world called Voxia Tertius. The irony was so perfect, so exquisitely symmetrical, that I could only laugh, a sound like shattering glass and pealing bells. My past was coming to reclaim me, the regiment that had been my crucible, that had forged me in the fires of Xylos, was coming to be my final audience. They would not find a world of gibbering cultists and twisted monsters. They would find a paradise. They would find a world of happy, beautiful people, living in harmony with a truth the Imperium had denied them, and they would be ordered to destroy it. The final brushstroke of my masterpiece would be the look on their faces as they were forced to burn heaven in the name of a dead god. I gathered my people in the central plaza of the transfigured village. I stood before them, my true form revealed, a being of terrible, divine beauty. I told them the truth, that the gray armies of the corpse emperor were coming, that they would try to take this beautiful world away from us, to turn it back into the prison of toil and misery it had once been. There was no fear in their eyes, only a calm, ecstatic certainty. They would not fight with lasguns and bayonets. That was the crude language of their old masters. They would fight with their joy. They would fight with their art. They would meet the gray tide of hatred with a tidal wave of pure, overwhelming sensation. Alara stood beside me, her hand in mine. She was no longer a simple farm woman. She was the high priestess of my new world, her face a mask of serene, terrifying beauty. "Let them come, brother," she said, her voice a melody. "We will show them what true beauty is." The ghost of Marek, the last, faint echo of my humanity, gave a final, silent sigh, and then dissolved completely. He had been replaced by the very thing he had sought to protect. His sister, transfigured, beautiful, and utterly damned. My work was complete. I was no longer a man haunted by a ghost. I was a single, perfect, and harmonious being, a true son of Slaanesh. And I was ready to show the Imperium the true meaning of art. The ships of the Imperial Guard arrived in orbit, blunt, ugly instruments of a blunt, ugly philosophy. They filled the sky, blocking out the soft, pastel light of the transfigured heavens. They expected resistance. They expected to be met with defiance, with violence. They were met with a song. From every corner of the planet my people began to sing. It was not a war cry. It was a symphony, a single, complex, and impossibly beautiful piece of music, sung by the collective soul of the world. It was a song of joy, of pain, of love, of despair, of every sensation, every emotion, woven together into a perfect, harmonious whole. It was the anthem of my new world, and it was a weapon. I watched from my garden, my arm around my sister priestess, as the song washed over the Imperial fleet. On the bridge of the lead ship, the duty's anvil, the grizzled, veteran guard commander would be listening to this impossible music, and it would be tearing his soul apart. It was a song that showed him every opportunity he had not taken, every love he had lost, every secret joy he had repressed in the name of duty. It was a song that showed him the utter, tragic waste of his own gray life. The first trooplanders began their descent. They came down not through a flak-filled sky, but through a gentle rain of flower petals that shimmered with narcotic pollens. The guardsmen who disembarked would not be met by screaming cultists, but by my people. My beautiful, smiling, and utterly terrifying people. They would not attack the guardsmen. They would welcome them. They would offer them the fruits of our garden, fruits that would show them the lie of their own reality. They would embrace them, and in that touch, share the glorious, liberating truth of sensation. They would look into their eyes and show them a universe of feeling that their harsh, brutal lives had denied them. Some of the guardsmen would resist. They would open fire, and they would find that their last bolts would turn to harmless butterflies. They would find that their bayonets would turn to soft, caressing feathers. Their violence, their hatred, their fear, it would all be absorbed, retuned, turned into another instrument in our grand symphony, and some of them would not resist. Some of them, the ones whose souls were already cracked, whose faith was already hollow, would accept the gift. They would drop their weapons. They would weep with a joy and a sorrow too profound to name. And they would join us. The battle for Voxia Tertius would not be a war. It would be a mass conversion, a joyous, terrible, and beautiful apocalypse of the soul. I had not created an army. I had created a mimetic plague, a spiritual contagion of pure, weaponized beauty. And the Imperial Guard, the blunt instrument of my own damnation, was now the delivery system for my art. It was my final, and most perfect, act of irony. I had kept my promise. I had survived. I had come home. And I had brought salvation. A beautiful, screaming, and exquisitely liberating salvation that would burn this world's memory from the Imperium star charts and replace it with a single, perfect, and eternal work of art, my masterpiece.